experience?
It was great. It was different. I'd never seen so many people together. And the surprising thing, when we decided to go, my friend and I, Frank Quinn, we decided to go, we had people who tell us I wouldn't go. And this was black people, say it's going to be trouble and so forth. But we were determined to go because we felt that somewhere there was a change. And we are grown now, we have families, young men. So we went there, and it's hard to put into words what it was like. It was wonderful. It was beautiful.
How'd you get there?
On the bus. We drove to Arlington and then caught a bus.
Was the bus segregated?
Yes. Yes, the bus was segregated. And we met a lot of people at the march when we just walked together. And it was really great. I'd never seen anything like that. And I left there with a feeling that there was some changes going to be made.
How close were you to Martin Luther King?
Oh, I would say I was about 50 yards. I would think something like about 30 rows back. I could see him very, very well.
And when he stood up to give that speech, what went through your mind?
Chills. In fact, I get chills and just think about it. It was really something. And I really felt there was a difference. There would be a difference.
What was the most memorable thing that happened that day?
Joining hands and singing. We were overcome. And just being together. And there were no incidents. But we were everywhere. Being young, you go all over. We were everywhere, and there were no incidents that I know of. And I met a guy from Alexandria that day. I never would have expected him to be there, but he was a little older than me. And I would say that he was a little more, he was kind of an outward person, But he was there, and we walked together. And there was a young white fellow that walked with us, but I can't remember his name. But he stayed with us the whole time. And when we had lunch, we went to a vendor, and we had lunch, and it was just great.
How did you hear about the march?
Well, it was in the paper, and the radio.
Was it publicized over the pulpit? Were
Yes.
ministers and
Yes.
were they excited about it? And
Didn't seem too excited to me. It seemed like they more was just get the information out. That was my opinion. I don't think they were that excited. I didn't go because of them.
okay. So you said you did vote, but did you have to pay a poll tax or?
Yes, we had to pay a poll tax. I can't remember what it was when I first started voting. There was a small poll tax, a couple dollars or something like that.
Did you have to take a literacy test?
No,
Just a poll tax.
just poll tax. Yeah.
So now you have the March on Washington, and you feel like things are going to change. And they signed the Civil Rights Act. Did things change?
Not that much. Not that much. No, I don't think it changed that much.
Can you talk a little bit more about what stayed the same, what did change?
One thing that stayed the same was going into business. That didn't change any because you had to go through so much to get the right paperwork and so forth. There was always something left out. I always wanted to have my own business. There was always something left out, or something else you had to do, or something you didn't get together. And at one point you had to have signatures of, somebody to recommend you for certain things, for a license, for a certain kind of license.
Were these people mostly white that needed to give you recommendations, or?
Yes.
So after the Civil Rights Act, was it easier? Well, accommodations were different, correct?
Yes, yes. When we well, we had hotels. We didn't have to drive straight through anymore, and we could stop at places and eat a lunch or something like that. I've never experienced anything negative in a restaurant or anything like that.
So when you traveled, did you ever travel south after the Civil Rights?
That's why I love to travel.
And how was it? Was it different?
It was different. It was different. There was one time when one of the best feelings I had was seeing Northern Virginia fade in my rearview mirror. And that's the truth. I did because when we went down south, it was different. The people were nicer. Seemed like the weekends were longer because it was different. People would speak, they would talk, they didn't run over you, and stuff like that. Now, I'm sure that, in fact, I know there was a lot of things going on down there that the blacks didn't like, but I never experienced it down south.
Do you think before the Civil Rights Act, was there a lot of maybe hidden racism in Northern Virginia, or was it blatantly, openly, or?
I think it was both. It was a lot hidden, yes. It was a lot hidden.
In what ways?
In ways of the way you were treated when you went in to do something or to get something or buy. That was one of the main things. I know it was when you tried to purchase any big item or something like that, there was always a problem.
It made you feel?
Yes, it made me feel just like, for instance, I know of cases where when I tried to buy something, I had to have more to put down than someone else,
Yeah.
things of that nature.
Now, you talked about applying for a job at drug fair.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit
Yes,
about that?
I applied for a job at drug fair when I was.
And how old were you? High school?
I was 16. I was 16 because I've always worked a couple of jobs. And this young white boy from Falls Church, we got to be friends, and we applied at the same time. And we applied for a clerk job, and they had openings for a clerk. But at the time, when they hired us, they hired him as a clerk and hired me as a porter. And for years, this guy stayed with Drug Fair, and they changed names and everything. But he always would call me. When he was a manager, he would call me and tell me he had an opening for me if I wanted to work. I'll never forget that guy.
And so did you go to different stores with him, or?
No. If he got in a bind at a store, sometime I would go, something like that. But by that time, I was working with my father at night when he had a truck that he used to drop newspaper, Post-Times Herald, produce at warehouses and stuff like that. And I would work during the day and go there, work with him at night. But of all the jobs I've had, I never worked weekends.
Okay.
So, I was able to do things and with my friends and everything.
Just getting back to the bus and driving when you were 16, the white bus drivers, were they all older? Did they have young bus drivers like you?
I really don't know. I really don't know. No, I really don't know, because I never come in interact with any of them. So anyhow.
And the supervisors that were in charge of the buses, how did they treat you? Were they white?
They were white, very stern, very stern. But as far as just being nasty to her, they weren't, and we didn't see it. We didn't see it. Well, one thing, if we brought a bus in for repairs, sometimes we'd be raked over the coals, You had to explain in detail, but they had to fix it because you had to take it back out, And they would, and didn't have all the modern equipment that they have now. but the buses were still raggedy.
So they were secondhand
Yes, they were
buses that
secondhand.
whites didn't use.
Yes. Sometimes the windows wouldn't go all the way out. It was really something.
So you're legendary within the Fairfax community as someone who's been an activist or someone who's really helped in the community. Can you talk about some of the things that you feel you've contributed to the community?
Well, I think I contributed to my church. I used to have a bus, and I used to the church used my bus for to pick up the kids for Sunday school and so forth. And I always contributed to anything that was going on in the community, you know, financially or whatever of that nature.
Do you think the African American community, you said it was close-knit, do you think that helped to buffer against segregation?
In what way?
And because you were such a close community, say in Vienna and Merrifield and Fairfax, did that help to not make segregation so bad because you had your own community?
We had our own community and people to our own outlet, I guess. You know, because you still couldn't do a lot of things or go a lot of places. And we had, we'd meet at churches and other social functions, and everybody knew someone, you know, people in different communities.
What kind of social functions?
Lawn parties.